My father's beliefs were extremely weird and bizarre. I was told that he would not die, he was immortal, that he knew everything, he had powers that could cause things to happen. He thought he was the unofficial ruler of the world. When I was 22, I ran away from the house. I just couldn't stand living there anymore. I used to get beaten up when I was a child. In my early teens, another person died. Later on, I learned that she was my mum. My name is Katie. I'm 40 years old. My father was a cult leader and I was held captive by him for 30 years. This is my story. My earliest memories were of aggression and violence from my father, feeling scared of everyone around me because you never knew when someone was going to snitch on you. I mean, something you would do just what you would think is very normal, like looking out of the window. And if someone reported, it could lead to any number of things. I was beaten up and I often saw other people being slapped and punched. There was no friendship or connection between any of the cult members. They were all vicious rivals. The only time when they connected was in order to find out how to punish a third person. The cult was called the Collective. They used to call it the AB's Communist Collective. My father's beliefs were extremely weird and bizarre, to say the least. He thought he was the unofficial ruler of the world and that he was being targeted by what he called the British fascist state because they knew that he was the rightful ruler of the world and they were desperate to prevent him from succeeding in what he was doing. I don't know whether it was right to call him a communist, but that's what he called himself. But his beliefs were more quasi-religious as time went on. He used to say that he loved me, but it was very conditional. It was only if I did as he asked. He didn't love me as a person. He only loved me for what I could do for him. And if you disagreed with him or challenged him in any way, you never knew what was going to happen to you. There were 9 other people when I was a child, when I was a baby, but I don't remember some of them. But I definitely remember one person leaving when I was around 6, and in my early teens, another person died. Later on, I learned that she was my mum. I was shown a piece of paper which had my birth details on it, and this woman, Shan, who I thought was a terrible person, was listed as my mother on that. She was very unpleasant, and I thought of her as a really nasty bully because that is really what she was. She was always the first to snitch on me and tell my dad that I'd done something that he didn't approve of, and which used to result in beatings or banishment of different sorts. My mum was not what you would expect a mum to be. I wasn't allowed to go out to the garden to play after a certain age. At one time I did used to go, but then they grew paranoid because the neighbours had children who used to want to talk to me, and they would say that these children were fascist agents trying to lure me away from the collective. I always had to be chaperoned by 2 or 3 people, sometimes more. And even when I was a teenager and in my 20s, I wasn't never allowed to go out on my own. Even to the garden, I had to go with my dad everywhere. When I was 22, I ran away from the house because I just couldn't stand living there anymore. I mean, I just kept hoping that things would change, and nothing ever did. So I thought, this time I need to just get out. I was like a caged bird with clipped wings. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to pay for things or cross a road or do anything. I started to realize that my hunch that something was not right was correct. My stepmother's sister, who was a disabled person, in 2009, she got very sick. Household chores increased for the people who were meant to be helping her. And Josie, who was a very loyal acolyte of my father, started becoming quite disenchanted, really. So I comforted Josie, but I also thought at the time that maybe this is an interesting opening for me to try to puncture the fail-safe cocoon of the cult. For a few years, I kind of built this bond with Josie, and it was genuine. I genuinely cared about her, but there was also another idea that I had in mind, that maybe she could help me to get out. In 2013, I started losing weight rapidly, and even though I was eating a lot, so Josie was worried about me because previously people had died. If something is wrong, she doesn't want the same thing to happen again. There was a leaflet about Centrepoint, which was a place for homeless people, like a halfway house. And I said to her, I wish there was a place like that I could go to, because I didn't have life skills. I didn't know how to do the basics. And I need to be somewhere where I can learn how to look after myself. One day we were watching the news in October 2013, and there was an item on forced marriages. There was a helpline number displayed on the screen, and both Josie and I memorized that number. The next time when my dad and stepmother went out for their shop, I asked Josie to ring that number. We arranged for someone to come and pick us up on the 25th of October 2013. Josie said that she didn't consider herself as a prisoner. She liked that situation very much. She worshipped my father and she didn't want to leave, but she thought that I could do with a bit of help because I had no knowledge of basic stuff at that point. Then the police got involved, and Aisha and Josie both were not allowed to go back. What I found the most challenging was just getting around, like not getting lost. I had a funny idea that as soon as these captors were removed from my life, I would just be like anybody else. Once I stepped out of the front door, it felt so vast, so enormous, so noisy, so bright, such a intense sensory overload that I couldn't really enjoy anything. I kind of knew things in theory, but I didn't know them in practice. Like, I knew if you wanted to get from A to B, you had to use a bus or a train, but I didn't know how to actually do it. And I knew you needed, if you wanted to buy something, you needed money, but I didn't know how that worked. The reading that I did helped me to keep sane, and especially The Lord of the Rings. I found Tolkien's books extremely inspiring, and it was about keeping your spirits up even in the darkest places and never giving up. And that really inspired me to keep on going, even when things felt impossibly difficult. And nowadays I go around looking after people's dogs and cats as well, but I love dogs so much. One of my happiest memories when I was still stuck in the cult was meeting the neighbour's dog. It used to be so unpleasant in the house. People would banish you, nobody would talk to you. You would try to talk to each person and they would treat you like you were a pariah or even a ghost, which didn't exist. And sometimes I remember I used to go upstairs to my room and stand at the window with tears pouring down my face. And then the dog used to jump up and down at the sight of me and wag his tail and bark and woof and howl, and he was just a bundle of joy. There's nothing in the world quite like a dog, honestly. They just make up for everything. I have forgiven my father because I think holding on to anger and hatred is poisonous, really, and it only harms the person who does that. If we indulge hatred and anger and revenge, if I do that, I'm no better than my dad, because that's what got him into that position in the first place, indulging his negative emotions rather than trying to rise above and deal with his situation with grace. We should implement mercy and grace in every situation that we find ourselves in.